"Forget about the beach trip, old fool," my son-in-law mockingly said, canceling my resort booking. I calmly replied, "Okay." But while he thought he'd won, I booked the entire resort in his name and invited all his enemies. He arrived in chaos, his life crumbling, and begged, "Please stop." Too late. The consequences of betrayal are inevitable, and now he'll pay for everything. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. The email notification pinged while I had my hands buried in the engine of my '67 Mustang. Oil-stained fingers, the smell of metal and grease, the hum of crickets through the open garage door. This was my sanctuary. Then I saw the subject line on my phone. Reservation cancellation, Sapphire Shores Resort. I wiped my hands and opened it. Your reservation, SR 47832, for June 15th, 17, has been canceled at the request of Mr. Derek Turner. Derek Turner, my son-in-law. I stood there for a moment, the wrench still in my hand, trying to make sense of it. I'd booked that oceanfront suite 3 months ago. $2,340 for a Father's Day weekend. Just me, the water, and my camera. A chance to photograph the sunrise without anyone telling me I was wasting time. The house lights were on. Through the workshop window, I could see the terrace. Derek, his mother Merlin, and his business partner Scott, sitting around the outdoor table, wine glasses catching the porch light. They were laughing about something. I walked across the lawn toward them. The June evening was warm, sticky with humidity rolling in from the bay. My house. Though you wouldn't know it from the way they'd arranged themselves. Derek at the head of the table like he owned the place, Merlin holding court beside him, Scott with his feet up on my deck furniture. "Frank!" Derek saw me first, his smile too wide, too pleased with itself. "We were just talking about you." "I got an email," I said, keeping my voice level, "from Sapphire Shores." "Oh, that?" Derek waved his hand like he was swatting a fly. "Yeah, I had to rebooking the place. Frederick Walters, you know, the investor I've been courting for months? He finally agreed to a meeting, August 20th through 22nd. It's huge for the company. You canceled my reservation. Come on, Frank. You can go to the beach anytime. There's a perfectly good pier right here in Sarasota." He took a sip of wine. My wine, from my cellar. "This is business. Real business. Not," he gestured vaguely toward my workshop, "tinkering with old cars." Merlin leaned forward, her face arranged in what she probably thought was sympathy. "Forget about the beach trip, old fool. Derek is doing something important here. You understand, don't you? At your age, you should be taking it easy anyway." Scott snorted into his glass, trying to hide his laughter and failing. I looked at my daughter Valerie, who sat at the far end of the table, staring down at her plate. She hadn't said a word, hadn't looked up. Her fingers twisted the stem of her wine glass around and around. "Valerie?" I said quietly. She glanced up, started to open her mouth, but Derek cut in. "Val knows how important this is. Right, honey? The Turner Strategic Solutions contract with Walters could save the company. Your father understands. He's a businessman, aren't you, Frank? Well, before retirement made you soft." The way he said it, the casual cruelty wrapped in false concern. The assumption that I'd just accept this, roll over, be the harmless old man they wanted me to be. "I see," I said. Derek's smile broadened. He thought he'd won. They all did. Even Valerie, who finally looked at me with something like relief. Glad there wouldn't be a scene, wouldn't be conflict. Glad her father was too tired, too worn down to fight back. "Good," Derek said, raising his glass. "I knew you'd understand. Now, we were just discussing the presentation strategy for Walters. Scott, what did you say about the quarterly projections?" I walked back to the workshop. Behind me, their conversation resumed, punctuated by laughter. My hand was remarkably steady as I cleaned the tools, put everything back in its place. The Mustang sat there, half restored, patient. It had waited 58 years. It could wait a little longer. Inside my chest, something cold and precise was clicking into place. I went to my room, the guest room now, apparently, though this was my house, bought with money I'd earned over 40 years in the hospitality industry. I opened my laptop. The email was still there. I read it again carefully. Then I opened my contacts. Diana Shaw's number was still there, along with dozens of others from my years at Coastal Luxury Group. resort managers, hotel owners, concierges from Miami to Monterey. People who remembered when I'd helped launch their careers, who owed me favors, who knew what I was capable of when I chose to act. At my desk, I pulled out a legal pad, started making lists, names, numbers, possibilities. Derek thought he was a player. He thought his little consulting firm made him somebody. He thought being married to my daughter gave him leverage, gave him the right to treat me like furniture in my own home. He had no idea what game he'd just started. The clock on my nightstand read 11:47 p.m. By the time dawn light started creeping through my window, I had 17 pages of notes. The plan was elegant, thorough, and would hurt him exactly where he deserved. I smiled for the first time since reading that email. Derek wanted to play businessman? Fine. Let's see how he handles playing against someone who actually knows the rules. I couldn't sleep, but not from anger, from planning. The kind of detailed, methodical planning I hadn't done since my last year at Coastal Luxury Group, when we'd orchestrated the acquisition of a competitor's entire resort chain through nothing but patience and well-placed phone calls. Around 4 a.m., I found myself thinking about the first time Derek had called me old fool. It wasn't to my face then. 2 years ago, Thanksgiving. I'd come back from the bathroom and heard him in the kitchen talking to Scott. "The old fool wants to give Valerie advice about the kids' education," Derek had said, his voice dripping with contempt. Like he knows anything about raising children in today's world. He's just taking up space in that house, living off his pension, playing with cars. Scott had laughed. "When are you going to make your move on the property?" "Soon, once I establish power of attorney. He's getting forgetful. It won't be hard to convince Valerie he needs help managing his affairs." I'd stood in the hallway for 10 minutes after that, my pie forgotten, watching them through the crack in the door, watching my son-in-law plot against me while eating at my table. I should have acted then, but I'd told myself I was being paranoid, that Derek was just venting, that he loved Valerie, and that was enough. The second memory came from my own past, 30 years ago. I was sitting in a Miami hotel suite with Richard Walters, Frederick's father, watching his entire business empire crumble in real time. The 2008 financial crisis had hit him hard. He'd made bad investments, worse decisions, and his hotels were going under one by one. "I'm finished, Frank," he'd said, his voice hollow. 3 generations of building gone. I'd looked at the spreadsheets, the contracts, the debt. Then I'd picked up the phone and started calling in favors. By morning, I'd secured him a $230,000 bridge loan, personal guarantee on my end, that kept his flagship property afloat just long enough to restructure. It took him 5 years to recover, but he did. "I owe you everything," Richard had said when he finally paid me back in full with interest. "My son Frederick will know this. He'll know what you did." I wondered if Derek knew that story. Probably not. He'd never asked about my career, never wanted to hear about the decades I'd spent building relationships in an industry where reputation was everything. To him, I was just an obstacle, a resource to be exploited. The third memory was sharper, more recent. 3 weeks ago, I'd walked into the living room and found Merlin showing Valerie a brochure for Sunset Haven, a senior living facility. She'd been highlighting prices with a marker. $6,800 a month, Merlin was saying. "But think of the peace of mind, dear. Your father is getting on in years. What if something happens? What if he falls or forgets to turn off the stove?" Valerie had looked uncertain. "He seems fine, Merlin. He's sharp as ever." "Is he? Have you noticed how much time he spends alone in that garage, wandering around at odd hours? It's not healthy." I'd backed out before they saw me. Later, I'd found the brochure in the kitchen trash, buried under coffee grounds. Now, sitting at my desk, with my plan taking shape, I understood. They weren't just disrespecting me, they were actively trying to erase me, to take everything I'd built, my home, my autonomy, my dignity, and package it neatly into their narrative of the declining old man who needed to be managed. The sunrise broke over the bay, painting my workshop in golden light. The Mustang sat there, still waiting. Unlike Derek, I understood patience. Unlike him, I understood that real power wasn't about forcing your way through situations. It was about knowing exactly which buttons to push, which relationships to activate, which dominoes to tip. I picked up my phone. First call, an old contact from my coastal days. someone who still worked in resort management. Second call, a private investigator I'd used years ago for corporate due diligence. Third call, well, that one would be special. That one would be to Diana Shaw at Sapphire Shores. Derek had canceled my reservation. That was fine. I had much bigger plans for that resort now. Plans that would make his little investor meeting look like a children's tea party. My hands were steady as I dialed. My voice was calm, professional, warm. This was the Frank Harrison that had built relationships across 40 years, that had saved Richard Walters' business, that had launched careers and created opportunities. Derek thought he'd humiliated me last night. He thought he'd put me in my place. He had no idea he'd just handed me the rope I needed. By Tuesday morning, June 2nd, I'd made 17 phone calls. By Wednesday, the private investigator was on retainer. By Thursday, Diana Shaw and I had an understanding that made me smile every time I thought about it. Derek wanted to play in the big leagues. Perfect. Let's see how he handles it when someone with actual connections starts playing back. Friday morning, June 6th, I drove to Miami. 3 hours down I-75, windows down, the Mustang's rebuilt engine purring like it remembered its glory days. I'd told Valerie I was visiting an old colleague. Not a lie, technically, just not the whole truth. The detective's report sat in my passenger seat. Michael Burns, the investigator I'd hired, had worked fast. Turner's Strategic Solutions was hemorrhaging money, $127,000 in debt, 3 clients threatening lawsuits, and the kicker, Derek had taken out a loan against my house using a forged power of attorney. My house. The one I'd bought in 1998 with money I'd earned negotiating deals, Derek couldn't even comprehend. I should have been furious. Instead, I felt almost grateful. He'd given me everything I needed. Frederick Walters worked out of a sleek office tower in downtown Miami, all glass and steel and money. His receptionist recognized my name immediately. "Mr. Harrison, Mr. Walters will be so pleased. Please go right in." Frederick stood when I entered, came around his desk with genuine warmth. At 45, he had his father's eyes, Richard's eyes, and the same firm handshake. "Uncle Frank," he embraced me, not the professional half-hug of business acquaintances, but real affection. "How long has it been? 3 years?" "4," I said. "Your father's funeral." His expression sobered. "I still miss him. Every day." He gestured to the leather chairs by the window. "He talked about you until the end, you know. What you did in 2008. How you saved everything." We sat. Miami sprawled below us, endless and glittering. I thought about how to approach this, then decided on the truth, or most of it. "I need to ask you about Derek Turner." Frederick's face shifted, the warmth cooling into something more professional. "Turner's Strategic Solutions. He's been pursuing a meeting with me for 8 months. Very persistent." He paused. "Why?" "He's my son-in-law, married to my daughter Valerie 5 years ago." "Ah!" Frederick leaned back. "I'm sensing this isn't a reference call." "He canceled my Father's Day reservation at Sapphire Shores. Told me he needed it for a meeting with you. Then called me an old fool to my face." Frederick's jaw tightened. "I haven't agreed to any meeting." "I know. But he's told everyone at home that you have. He's banking everything on this deal with you. Literally. His company is drowning, and he thinks you're the life raft. And you want me to?" I met his eyes. "I want you to come to Sapphire Shores on August 20th. Walk into whatever event he's hosting, and pretend you've never heard of Derek Turner or his company." Frederick was quiet for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "You're not asking me to destroy him. You're asking me to let him destroy himself. In front of everyone who matters to him, yes. My father always said you were the most ruthless negotiator he'd ever met. He meant it as a compliment." Frederick stood, extended his hand. "It would be my pleasure, Uncle Frank. After what you did for my family, this is the least I can do." We shook on it. As I drove back to Sarasota, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the sharp edge of competitive focus. The same feeling I'd had closing million-dollar deals, turning impossible situations into victories. Derek thought I was soft, finished, an old man playing with cars. He was about to learn the difference between playing businessman and actually being one. That evening I made more calls from my workshop. Marcus Jenkins, Derek's biggest competitor, answered on the second ring. "Mr. Jenkins? My name is Robert Chen. I'm Mr. Turner's new assistant." The lie came easily. I'm calling to invite you to an exclusive networking event at Sapphire Shores Resort, August 20th through 22nd. All expenses covered. Mr. Turner wanted to extend a personal invitation to key industry leaders. A pause. Derek Turner is inviting me to a networking event. The same Derek Turner who tried to poach my clients last year. Mr. Turner believes in professional reconciliation. He's hoping to mend bridges. Interesting. Jenkins sounded amused. You know what? Tell Derek I accept. This should be entertaining. 3 more competitors. Same script. Same results. By midnight, I'd invited everyone Derek had ever crossed, cheated, or insulted. 8 confirmations. 2 maybes. All of them curious about what Derek Turner was really up to. The house was quiet when I went inside. Through Valerie's bedroom door, I could hear Derek on the phone with Scott. Their voices low but excited. Walters confirmed for the 20th. This is it, man. This is everything. Once we close this deal, we can finally move forward with the other plans. Other plans? I already knew what those were. The forged power of attorney, the nursing home brochures, the systematic erasure of Frank Harrison from his own life. I kept walking. In my room, I added 8 more names to my list. The plan was coming together like a complex engineering project, each piece fitting precisely into place. Derek had spent 5 years undermining me, 5 years of small cruelties and casual contempt. He thought I didn't notice, thought I was too old, too tired, too irrelevant to fight back. What he didn't understand was that I'd spent decades in an industry where one wrong move could cost millions, where relationships were currency and reputation was everything, where patience wasn't weakness, it was strategy. And now all that experience, all those connections, all that careful cultivation of professional relationships was about to pay dividends Derek couldn't even imagine. I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Same gray hair, same weathered face. But behind my eyes, something had changed. The old Frank, the accommodating father-in-law, the harmless retiree, was gone. In his place stood the man who'd built a career on knowing exactly how to make people regret underestimating him. The days after Miami fell into a careful rhythm. I maintained my usual routine, working on the Mustang, taking morning walks along the bay, being the docile old man they expected. But now I was watching, really watching. And once you start looking, you see everything. Tuesday evening, Derek and Scott were in the living room with spreadsheets everywhere. I brought them coffee, playing the helpful father-in-law, and glimpsed the numbers over Derek's shoulder. Revenue projections that were pure fantasy. Client lists that included companies that had already fired them. A house of cards built on lies and wishful thinking. Thanks, Frank, Derek said without looking up. His tone suggested I was the help. I smiled. Any time. Wednesday morning, Merlin cornered Valerie in the kitchen. I was in the hallway, technically out of sight. The attorney said we need Frank's signature on the guardianship papers by July 1st, Merlin said quietly. Once Derek's meeting with Walters goes well, we'll have the financial leverage to push harder. Frank can't live alone much longer. It's not safe. Guardianship papers? They were actually going through with it. Valerie's voice was uncertain. I don't know, Merlin. Dad seems perfectly capable. Sweetheart, you're not here during the day. I see him wandering around, confused. Yesterday he couldn't remember where he'd put his car keys. It took him 20 minutes to find them. A lie. I'd been in my workshop all day, but Valerie wouldn't know that. I walked back outside before they could see me. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of staying calm, of not confronting them right then and there. But confrontation wasn't the play. Not yet. That afternoon, I had an appointment I'd been anticipating. Edward Glenn's law office occupied the corner of a professional building on Tamiami Trail. Glenn himself was 58, steel gray hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Harrison, pleasure to meet you. His handshake was firm. Your message mentioned some estate planning concerns? Several. I laid out the detective's report. The forged power of attorney. The loan taken against my house. The attempted guardianship filing. Glenn's expression darkened as he read. This is fraud. Criminal fraud. You could have your son-in-law arrested. I could, I agreed. But that's not what I want. Not yet. What do you want? I want to protect my assets, completely and irrevocably. I want every legal avenue they're trying to exploit sealed off, and I want it done quietly so they don't know until it's too late. Glenn leaned back in his chair. A living trust would do it. Transfer all assets into the trust. Your house, accounts, investments. You remain the trustee and beneficiary during your lifetime. Upon your death, everything passes to your designated heir. In this case, I assume your daughter, directly to Valerie, not through her husband. Easily done. Will include specific provisions excluding spouses from inheritance. It's ironclad. He made notes. What about immediate management? Given your son-in-law's attempts at power of attorney, assign it to a neutral financial advisor, not family, someone with no stake in this beyond professional responsibility. I can recommend several. Glenn looked up at me. Mr. Harrison, this is thorough work. Most people in your situation would be panicking. You're 3 steps ahead. I've had practice, I said dryly. The paperwork took 3 days. 3 days of meetings, signatures, notarizations. The trust alone ran 47 pages. Every asset cataloged, the house worth $1,240,000, savings accounts totaling $380,000, investment portfolio at $620,000. All of it moved into a legal fortress Derek couldn't touch. On June 18th, the day it became official, I treated myself to lunch at a waterfront restaurant. Sat there with my camera, photographing boats in the harbor, feeling lighter than I had in years. My phone buzzed, a text from Diana Shaw at Sapphire Shores. Conference room and 87 rooms confirmed for August 20th to 22. Name on file, Derek Turner. Total, $225,550 after loyalty discount. Looking forward to seeing you, Frank. Beautiful. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. That evening, Derek announced at dinner that everything was falling into place. The meeting with Walters was confirmed. The presentation was nearly ready. Turner Strategic Solutions was about to turn around. This is going to change everything, he said, raising his wine glass. My wine. To new beginnings. Merlin beamed at him. Scott clapped him on the back. Valerie managed a smile, though I caught her glancing at me with something that might have been guilt. To new beginnings, I echoed, raising my glass. Derek met my eyes across the table. For just a moment, I saw a flicker of uncertainty there, like he was trying to figure out why I wasn't resisting anymore, why I'd become so compliant. Then it passed. He smiled, satisfied that he'd finally broken me, finally put the old man in his place. I smiled back. Let him think whatever he wanted. In 3 months, he'd be standing in the lobby of Sapphire Shores, watching his entire world crumble around him. Every person he'd wronged, every competitor he'd underestimated, every lie he'd told coming home to roost all at once. And I'd be there, camera in hand, documenting every moment of his realization. That night, alone in my workshop with the Mustang, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. The car was coming along nicely. New carburetor installed last week, transmission rebuilt, paint job scheduled for July. Everything in its time, everything in its place, patience and precision. Derek had taught me something valuable, actually. He'd shown me that I'd been too passive for too long, too willing to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to let things slide for the sake of family harmony. But there's a difference between keeping the peace and being a doormat, between patience and passivity, between picking your battles and letting people walk all over you. I'd picked my battle now, and when you spend your entire career learning how to win, you don't forget just because you retire. I ran my hand along the Mustang's hood. In 2 months, this car would be purring down the highway, restored to its former glory. Same with my life. Derek thought he'd won, thought he'd secured his future at my expense. July 1st arrived with the kind of oppressive Florida heat that makes everything feel heavier. I drove to Edward Glenn's office on Tamiami Trail with a manila folder that weighed almost nothing but contained everything. Glenn's receptionist ushered me in immediately. The lawyer stood when I entered. 58, steel gray hair, the kind of handshake that told you he didn't waste time on pleasantries when there was work to do. Mr. Harrison, your message mentioned some urgent estate planning concerns. I placed the folder on his desk. My son-in-law has been busy. I thought you should see exactly how busy. He opened it. The first document was the loan application, $45,000 against my house at 3847 Bayshore Drive. My signature at the bottom, except it wasn't my signature. Close, but not quite right. The F in Frank had a loop I'd never made in my life. Glenn's expression darkened as he flipped through the pages. The notary stamp from some office in Tampa. The power of attorney that supposedly gave Derek control over my assets. Bank statements showing the money had been deposited into Turner Strategic Solutions account 3 weeks ago. This is fraud, he said quietly. Criminal fraud, document forgery, identity theft, unauthorized use of property as collateral. He looked up at me. You could have your son-in-law arrested today. Charged, prosecuted. This is 5 years minimum if convicted. I know. Then why are you here instead of the police station? I settled back in my chair. Because I want something more permanent than a criminal case that might take years to resolve. I want my assets protected. Completely. Irrevocably. And I want it done in a way that Derek doesn't see coming until it's too late to do anything about it. Glenn studied me for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not a warm smile, but the smile of someone who recognized a fellow professional at work. Tell me what you're thinking. We spent 3 hours that first day mapping it out. A living trust, the kind of legal fortress that takes everything I own and puts it somewhere Derek's grasping hands can never reach. The house worth $1,240,000. Savings accounts totaling $380,000. Investment portfolio at $620,000. All of it transferred into a trust with me as trustee and beneficiary during my lifetime. And upon your death? Glenn asked, his pen poised over the legal pad. Direct to Valerie, my daughter. Not through her husband. Not joint ownership. Hers alone with specific provisions excluding any spousal claims. That's ironclad in Florida. We can make it unbreakable. He made notes. What about immediate management? Given the circumstances, we should establish a power of attorney to someone who isn't family. Can you recommend a financial advisor? Someone with no stake in this except professional responsibility? Several. I'll have you meet with them this week. The paperwork took time. Days of meetings, signatures, notarizations. Every document triple-checked. Every provision examined from every angle. Glenn worked like a man who understood that, in law, details are everything. On July 10th, while Derek and Scott were at the office, presumably working on their presentation for Walters, I met with Margaret Chen, the financial advisor Glenn recommended. 62, sharp eyes, a reputation for managing estates worth 10 times what mine was worth. Mr. Glenn briefed me on the situation, she said as we sat in her downtown office. Your son-in-law attempted to defraud you. You're protecting your assets. Straightforward. Can you take it on? I can, but I need you to understand something. Once we execute these documents, you're declaring war. Your son-in-law will know someone is protecting you legally. He'll escalate. I thought about that. About Derek's face when he realized his careful plans were falling apart. About Merlin's shock when she discovered the nursing home scheme wouldn't work. About Scott's panic when he understood his cut of my inheritance had evaporated. Let him escalate, I said. I'm ready. We signed the documents on July 15th. 47 pages of legal language that essentially said Frank Harrison's assets are his own, protected by law, and Derek Turner can't touch a single dollar of it. The next step was riskier. Glenn had reviewed the forged documents and found the notary who'd stamped them, a woman named Patricia Vance, who worked out of a strip mall office in Tampa. Michael Burns, my investigator, had tracked her down. For $800, she'd notarized a power of attorney without checking identification, without verifying signatures, without doing any of the things notaries are legally required to do. We have 2 choices, Glenn said on July 16th. Criminal complaint or civil lawsuit against the bank that accepted the fraudulent collateral. The bank, I said, faster, cleaner, and more immediately painful for Derek. Glenn's smile was sharp. I was hoping you'd say that. The lawsuit was filed on July 17th. Glenn moved fast, emergency motion for immediate relief, citing fraud and the bank's failure to properly verify documentation before issuing a $45,000 loan. We had everything, the forged signatures, the testimony about the notary, the timeline showing Derek had deposited the money the same day the loan was approved. The bank's lawyers took one look at our evidence and folded like a cheap tent. Settlement offer arrived July 18th. They would immediately void the loan, demand full repayment from Derek within 45 days, issue a formal apology, and pay my legal fees. In exchange, we wouldn't pursue further action or publicity. Glenn looked at me. Take it? Take it? The letter went out that afternoon. Certified mail to Derek's office at 1523 Main Street. I imagined him opening it at his desk, Scott probably looking over his shoulder. The way his face would change as he read. Your loan, BL 9847, has been voided due to procedural violations. The full amount of $48,200, principal plus accrued interest, must be repaid by September 1st, 2025. I was in my workshop when I heard the explosion from inside the house. What the hell is this? Derek's voice, loud enough to hear through the walls. I kept working on the Mustang's carburetor, letting the sound wash over me like background noise. Through the window, I could see him pacing on the terrace, phone pressed to his ear, Scott beside him looking panicked. Merlin had come out from somewhere, her face tight with concern. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language. Derek was in full meltdown mode, arms waving, face red, that vein in his forehead that only appeared when he was truly losing control. Scott kept trying to calm him down. Merlin was talking rapidly, probably suggesting solutions, damage control. None of it would help. The money was gone, spent on their preparations for Walters. The new office furniture, the presentation materials, the deposit on the conference room at Sapphire Shores, whatever else they'd thought they needed to look successful. And now the bank wanted it all back in 6 weeks. I allowed myself a small smile as I tightened a bolt. This was just the opening move. The real game was still to come. That evening at dinner, Derek barely spoke. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Merlin kept shooting me suspicious glances, like she was trying to figure out if I had anything to do with their sudden reversal of fortune. Valerie noticed. Is everything okay? Fine, Derek said sharply, then softer, remembering his mask. Just some business complications. Nothing to worry about. I ate my salad quietly, the very picture of the harmless old man who knew nothing about legal maneuvers or financial warfare. The weeks that followed were masterclasses in watching someone slowly come apart. Derek, Merlin, and Scott spent July scrambling. I'd see them huddled in the living room late at night, laptops open, papers scattered everywhere, hear the urgent phone calls at odd hours, watch as they sold things. Scott's BMW disappeared first, replaced by a 10-year-old Honda. Merlin's jewelry started vanishing piece by piece. They took out another loan, $52,000 at 18% interest. I knew because Scott left the paperwork on the kitchen counter one morning, and I photographed it with my phone while pretending to make coffee. The walls were closing in on them, and they didn't even know I was the one pushing. August 3rd, I was in the workshop, finishing the Mustang's new paint job, deep blue, the color it had been when it rolled off the assembly line in 1967, when I heard footsteps behind me. Scott stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. His usual smugness had eroded into something more desperate. Mr. Harrison, can I talk to you for a minute? I didn't look up from buffing the hood. You're talking. Right, listen. He came closer, hands in his pockets, trying to look casual and failing. Derek and we realize things have been tense lately. Maybe we came on too strong about the power of attorney thing, and the nursing home discussions. That was Merlin's idea mostly, and get to the point, Scott. He swallowed. We're in a tough spot financially, just temporary until the Walters deal goes through. But if we can't make that loan payment by September 1st, we're looking at serious consequences. So I was wondering, maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement, a short-term loan from you. We'd pay you back with interest once. No. The word hung in the air between us. Scott's face went through several expressions, surprise, confusion, then a flash of anger he quickly tried to hide. Mr. Harrison, I don't think you understand. If Turner Strategic Solutions goes under, that affects Valerie too. Your daughter, your grandchildren, we're family. I finally looked at him, really looked at him until he shifted uncomfortably. Family, I repeated. Interesting word choice, Scott. Is that what you were thinking about when you paid that notary $800 to forge my signature? When you convinced Derek to take out a loan against my house without my knowledge? when you and Merlin were planning which nursing home to ship me off to." The color drained from Scott's face. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out, just this strangled sound, like he was choking on his own tongue. We didn't, that's not. "Let me be clear," I said, turning back to the car. "You three have spent years treating me like I'm senile, like I don't notice things, like I'm too old and stupid to understand what's happening in my own house." I ran the buffer over a spot I'd already polished. "You want a compromise? Here's one. Get out of my workshop before I decide to add you to the lawsuit I filed against the bank." Scott backed toward the door, his face the color of old newspaper. "Derek's right about you. You're not as harmless as you pretend." "No," I agreed. "I'm not." He left. Through the window, I watched him hurry across the lawn toward the house, probably to report back to Derek and Merlin, to tell them the old fool had teeth after all. Good. Let them worry. The real beauty of it was watching them try to maintain their composure around Valerie. Derek still playing the confident businessman, Merlin still the concerned mother-in-law, both of them pretending everything was fine while they quietly hemorrhaged money and options. August 15th, Derek's phone pinged at breakfast. I was reading the newspaper, or pretending to, while actually watching his face over the edge of the sports section. He opened his email, and I saw the exact moment he read the message from Sapphire Shores. His expression shifted from neutral to pleased, to almost giddy. "It's confirmed," he said to Scott, who was sitting beside him. "The 20th through 22nd. Conference room, accommodations for the team, everything." "They say how many attendees?" Scott asked, "expecting 45 guests based on our estimate." Derek's smile was pure triumph. "This is it. This is where we turn everything around." I sipped my coffee and said nothing. Let him have this moment. Let him think Walters was coming to save them. Let him imagine his carefully planned investor meeting, where he'd pitch his company's future to a man who'd barely heard of him. He had no idea that 67 people were actually coming to his party. Most of them people he'd wronged, cheated, or insulted. All of them thinking they'd been personally invited by Derek Turner to an exclusive networking event. Diana Shaw and I had refined the details over several calls. She'd even added a few touches of her own, a welcome banner with Derek's name, a personalized itinerary for each guest, premium champagne for the reception. Everything designed to make it look like Derek had spared no expense, all on his credit, all in his name, all amounting to $225,550. That evening I walked down to the Bay Pier, the one Derek had so casually dismissed as good enough for me. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. I took a few photos, the camera comfortable and familiar in my hands. From here I could see my house up on the bluff. The lights were on in the living room, where Derek, Merlin, and Scott were probably celebrating their confirmed reservation, making final preparations for their big meeting. They still thought they were in control, still thought the worst thing that had happened was a loan getting voided, a minor setback before their big comeback. They had no idea that in exactly 5 days they'd be standing in the lobby of Sapphire Shores, watching their entire world collapse in real time. No idea that every person they'd ever wronged would be there to witness it. No idea that the investor they were counting on would walk right past them to embrace me instead. The anticipation was almost sweeter than the revenge itself. Almost. I took one more photo of the sunset, then headed back up to the house. Derek was on the terrace, phone pressed to his ear, laughing about something. He saw me and his smile faded slightly, just enough to show he still didn't trust this calm, compliant version of me. Smart man. Too late, but smart. "Evening, Derek," I said pleasantly as I passed. "Big week ahead for you." "Yes," he said cautiously. "Yes, it is." I went inside, leaving him there in the gathering dark, probably wondering why I seemed so unconcerned about his upcoming triumph. 5 more days. Then he'd understand everything, and I'd be there with my camera, ready to capture every moment of his realization. August 20th arrived with cloudless skies and temperatures pushing 90 degrees. Perfect weather for a beach resort. Perfect weather for watching someone's world fall apart. I drove to Sapphire Shores alone, taking the scenic route along the coast. The Mustang purred beneath me, newly restored, the deep blue paint gleaming in the sunlight. Everything coming together at exactly the right moment. Derek, Scott, and Merlin had left 2 hours earlier, loaded down with presentation materials and desperate optimism. I'd watched them go from my workshop window, Derek checking his watch obsessively, Scott carrying 3 laptop bags, Merlin fussing with her hair in the car mirror. They were walking into a trap so carefully constructed they'd never see it until it closed around them. I arrived at the resort at 1:47 p.m. Diana Shaw met me personally in the parking lot, her professional smile warm and genuine. "Mr. Harrison, everything is ready." The welcome banner? Derek Turner's name, 48-point font, impossible to miss. Her eyes sparkled with something between amusement and satisfaction, along with the itinerary cards for all 67 guests, each one personalized, each one thanking them for attending Derek Turner's exclusive networking event. "You've outdone yourself, Diana. After what you told me about him canceling your Father's Day reservation," she shook her head. "Consider this professional courtesy among hospitality veterans." I checked into my suite, ocean view, corner unit, perfect vantage point for watching the lobby below. My camera sat ready on the desk, lenses cleaned, batteries charged. I'd been photographing landscapes for years, but today I'd be documenting something far more satisfying. At 2:03 p.m., Derek's rental car pulled up to the entrance. Through my telephoto lens, I watched them climb out. Derek in his best suit, trying to project confidence. Scott hovering nervously, checking his phone every 30 seconds. Merlin in a dress that probably cost more than they could afford, playing the part of the successful businessman's mother. They walked into the lobby like they owned it. Diana greeted them at reception with flawless professionalism. "Good afternoon. You must be Mr. Turner." Derek preened. "Yes, I'm the organizer of this event. Derek Turner, Turner Strategic Solutions. My business partner, Scott Kelly, and my mother, Merlin Turner." "Wonderful. Your guests are already beginning to arrive?" Derek's smile faltered. "Guests? We're expecting Mr. Frederick Walters at 6 o'clock. Just his team and ours for the presentation." "Oh." Diana consulted her tablet with perfect innocence. "According to our system, you have 67 confirmed attendees for your 3-day networking event. Many have already checked in." I watched Derek's face through the camera, the confusion rippling across his features, the way his eyes narrowed as he tried to process information that didn't match his reality. "That's impossible. I only booked the conference room for Mr. Turner." Marcus Jenkins, Derek's biggest competitor, strode through the lobby doors, all confidence and expensive cologne. I'd met Marcus once, years ago at an industry conference. Sharp operator, never forgot a slight. "Jenkins?" Derek's voice cracked slightly. "What are you doing here?" "What do you mean, what am I doing here?" Marcus's smile was all teeth. "Your assistant called me personally. Said you wanted to mend bridges with an exclusive networking event. I have to admit, I was skeptical, but the invitation was too interesting to pass up." "My assistant?" Derek shot a panicked look at Scott. "We don't have an assistant." Behind Marcus, 4 more people entered. I recognized 3 of them from my research. Derek's other competitors. All of them men he'd undercut, insulted, or sabotaged over the past 5 years. The 4th was a woman in her 50s carrying a reporter's notebook. Sarah Collins, business journalist for the Sarasota Herald-Tribune. I'd sent her an anonymous tip about Turner Strategic Solutions 3 weeks ago. Looked like she'd followed up. Derek's face had gone from confused to pale. "This is some kind of mistake. Diana, can you check the reservation? I only booked Mr. Turner." Diana's smile never wavered as she turned her tablet to show him. "All 87 rooms of Sapphire Shores Resort have been reserved in your name for August 20th through 22nd. 3 days, full property buyout. The contract was signed on June 5th. "What?" The word came out strangled. "That's impossible. I never. The cost alone would be $225,550, Diana said pleasantly. "Though we did offer a loyalty discount, the full amount was charged to the card on file." Scott grabbed Derek's arm. "Tell me you didn't sign anything without telling me. Tell me you didn't drop $250,000 on this." "I didn't!" Derek's voice rose, drawing attention from the gathering crowd in the lobby. "I booked a conference room. Just the conference room. $18,000, not..." Sir, if you'd like to review the contract, I have a copy here. Diana produced a folder. Your signature is on page 3. I watched through the lens as Derek snatched the folder, his hands shaking. He flipped to page 3, and even from my position 5 floors up, I could see the blood drain from his face. It was his signature, close enough that most people would never notice the subtle differences. Close enough that I'd needed to practice it 15 times before Edward Glenn's contact at the law firm had gotten it perfect enough to pass casual inspection. This isn't... I didn't... Derek looked around wildly, like he was searching for someone to blame. His eyes landed on Scott, on Merlin, on the growing crowd of unwanted guests. Who did this? The elevator chimed. I stepped out into the lobby, linen suit pressed, camera around my neck, every inch the retired professional enjoying a beach resort. Derek saw me. His entire body went rigid. You, he whispered. I walked toward the reception desk, nodding pleasantly at Diana. Diana, thank you for the wonderful accommodations. The suite is perfect. Always a pleasure, Mr. Harrison. Derek's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. Then he found his voice, loud enough to echo through the marble lobby. You! This was you! Every eye in the room turned to us. I looked at him with mild surprise. Derek, I didn't know you'd be here. What a coincidence. Coincidence? His face was shifting from pale to red, veins standing out on his forehead. You set this up. You canceled my real reservation and made this... I canceled your reservation. I let confusion color my voice. Derek, I believe you canceled mine back in June. For Father's Day, remember? You said I should forget about the beach trip, that I was just an old fool who could make do with the local pier. The silence that followed was exquisite. Marcus Jenkins raised his eyebrows. Wait, this is your father-in-law? The one you were talking about at the chamber meeting? Derek's eyes widened. That wasn't... You said he was senile, Marcus continued, warming to his topic, that he couldn't manage his own affairs, that you were doing him a favor by taking control of his assets. Several people had their phones out now recording. Sarah Collins was writing rapidly in her notebook. That's not... I was misquoted? Derek spun to face me, desperation and rage warring in his expression. What did you do? What the hell did you do? I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. I didn't cancel your reservation, Derek. You booked the conference room all by yourself. I simply made sure your event was everything it deserved to be. All your competitors in one place. The clients you defrauded. A few journalists interested in your business practices. I paused. Oh, and I invited Frederick Walters, too. Though I should mention, he's not here for you. Walters? Hope flashed across Derek's face. He's still coming. He'll be here at 6. We have dinner reservations. The hope died as comprehension dawned. We? Frederick and I go back years. I saved his father's business in 2008. He's always been very grateful. I adjusted my camera. You know, Derek, you were right about one thing. I am old, but I spent those years learning how business really works, how relationships matter, how trust and reputation are worth more than any deal you can force through deception. Scott had backed away from Derek, his face gray. Merlin clutched her purse like it was a life preserver, and Derek just stood there, finally understanding the magnitude of what had happened. You... He took a step toward me, hands clenched. You destroyed everything. Our business, our reputation, our... No. The word came out cold and final. You destroyed it. I simply made sure everyone could watch. The next few hours were chaos professionally packaged as a networking event. Derek, Scott, and Merlin tried damage control, tried to explain to the arriving guests that this was all a misunderstanding, that they hadn't actually invited Derek's competitors and the clients he'd wronged. But every guest had an email invitation with Derek Turner's name on it. Every guest had received a confirmation call from Derek's assistant. Every detail pointed back to him. At 4:30 p.m., I was on the terrace photographing the ocean when Scott found me. His face had aged 10 years in 2 hours. Please, he sat down without being invited, hands clasped between his knees. Please, Mr. Harrison, this is going too far. Derek's going to lose everything. The business, his marriage. His marriage was lost the moment he forged my signature to steal from me, I said, not lowering the camera. The business was lost when he built it on lies. I'm simply documenting the consequences. We can fix this. We'll pay back the loan. With what money, Scott? I finally looked at him. You're already underwater. 127,000 in existing debt, plus the 52,000 you borrowed at 18%. Now add 225,000 for a resort you can't afford, plus the 18,000 for the conference room Derek actually booked. That's $422,650. Where exactly were you planning to find that? Scott's face crumbled. We thought Walters was supposed to... Frederick Walters was never going to invest in Turner Strategic Solutions. Derek pursued him for 8 months, and Frederick ignored every email, every call, every attempt at contact. Your entire business plan was built on a fantasy. You could have just said no when we asked for power of attorney. You didn't have to... I did say no. My voice hardened. I said no, and Derek screamed that I was a burden to my family. Your friend, the man you're defending right now, tried to declare me mentally incompetent, tried to steal my house, tried to have me committed to a nursing home. So tell me, Scott, what exactly should I have done instead? He had no answer. After a moment, he stood and walked away, shoulders slumped. At 5:45 p.m., Derek made his move. I saw him corner Diana near the restaurant, watched his body language shift from desperate to aggressive. He was demanding something, probably demanding she cancel the entire reservation, probably threatening legal action. Diana's expression never changed, but I saw her gesture to someone. Hotel security. 2 large men in subtle uniforms. They didn't approach Derek, just positioned themselves nearby, a reminder that this was Diana's resort, not his. Derek saw them, saw he was outmatched, and backed down, but the fury in his eyes promised this wasn't over. At 6:02 p.m., Frederick Walters arrived. I was in the lobby when he walked in, and I made sure Derek saw me greet him. Saw the embrace, the genuine warmth, the easy friendship of 2 men who actually respected each other. Derek started toward us, Scott half a step behind, their presentation materials clutched like weapons. They'd clearly decided to make one last desperate pitch. Mr. Walters, Derek's voice was too loud, too eager. Thank God you're here. I know there's been some confusion about this event, but I wanted to assure you that Turner Strategic Solutions is still very much interested in... Frederick looked at him blankly. I'm sorry. Do I know you? Derek froze. I've been trying to reach you for months. Derek Turner, Turner Strategic Solutions. I sent you our complete proposal, market analysis, growth projections. Ah! Frederick's expression remained politely distant. I don't recall, I'm afraid. My assistant screens several hundred proposals monthly. Only a fraction make it to my desk. He turned back to me. Frank, should we head to dinner? I'm starving, and you promised me that seafood place you mentioned. Of course. I started to walk away, then paused. Oh, Derek, since you're hosting this lovely networking event, you should make the most of it. I believe there's a journalist from the Herald Tribune here. Sarah Collins. She was asking questions about your business practices earlier. Might be a good opportunity to clarify some things. Derek's face went through several colors before settling on a sickly gray. As Frederick and I walked to the restaurant, I heard Sarah Collins' voice behind us. Mr. Turner, I'd love to get your comment on the forged power of attorney documents that were filed with the bank. My sources indicate you took out a loan against property that wasn't yours? The restaurant had ocean views and excellent wine. Frederick and I talked about his father, about the old days in the hospitality industry, about everything except the man currently imploding in the lobby 3 floors below. At 8:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Diana. Lobby situation escalating, thought you should know. I excused myself and walked to the balcony overlooking the resort entrance. Even from this distance, I could hear raised voices. Derek was arguing with 3 men, the clients he'd defrauded, demanding their money back. Marcus Jenkins was filming the whole thing on his phone. Scott was trying to pull Derek away, but Merlin was pushing him forward, shouting something about standing up for himself. Security intervened, separating everyone, but the damage was done. Dozens of phones had captured it. By tomorrow, it would be all over social media. At 10:30 p.m., Valerie arrived. I hadn't invited her, hadn't wanted her to see her husband's collapse in real time. But she'd driven up anyway, probably after Derek had called her in desperation. I found her standing outside the lobby, watching through the glass doors, as Derek paced like a caged animal, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling every contact he had left, trying to find some way out. "Dad?" Her voice was small. "What did you do?" "I defended myself," I said quietly, "and I documented what they tried to do to me. But this—" She gestured at the resort, at the chaos visible through the windows. "This is destruction." "No, sweetheart. This is consequences." I turned to face her. "Your husband forged my signature to steal $45,000 from me. He tried to have me declared incompetent. He and Merlin were actively planning to put me in a nursing home and take everything I've worked for. This," I gestured at the resort, "this is just making sure everyone knows exactly who Derek Turner really is." Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't look away. "I didn't know about the forged documents, about the nursing home plans. I thought—" "He said you'd agreed to help with the loan. I know you didn't know. That's why you're not in there with them right now." I touched her shoulder gently. "Valerie, you have a choice to make, but you should make it with full information. Come to my suite tomorrow morning. I have documents you need to see." She nodded, wiping her eyes, and left without going inside. I returned to the terrace and watched the ocean under moonlight. My camera sat beside me, memory card full of the day's images, Derek's confusion turning to horror, Scott's desperate attempts at damage control, Merlin's fury when she realized the trap they'd walked into, but also Frederick's genuine embrace, Diana's professional execution of every detail I'd planned, the moment when Derek finally understood that the old fool had outplayed him at every turn. Tomorrow would bring more consequences, the bills, the demands, the full weight of their disaster. But tonight I just sat and listened to the waves, feeling lighter than I had in years. The trap was sprung. The rest was just cleanup. The aftermath hit faster than Derek could have imagined. By Friday morning, August 22nd, the social media storm had gone viral. Videos of Derek's meltdown in the lobby, photos of him arguing with the defrauded clients, screenshots of the forged power of attorney documents that Sarah Collins had published in her scathing expose. Turner Strategic Solutions lost its 3 remaining clients within 48 hours. Not through lawsuits or formal complaints, they just quietly terminated their contracts and moved on. In business, reputation is everything. Derek's was now toxic waste. I watched it unfold from my workshop, working on the Mustang's final details, while my phone buzzed with updates. The total debt had crystallized into an impossible number: $344,450. The resort charges Diana was rightfully demanding, the high-interest loan they'd taken out in desperation, the voided bank loan, the conference room Derek had actually booked. No way out, no investors, no business, no future. On August 25th, I was adjusting the Mustang's carburetor when I heard footsteps. Valerie stood in the doorway, her eyes red and swollen. She'd been at the resort, but had driven home alone the morning after the disaster. "Dad?" Her voice broke. "Can we talk?" I set down my tools. "Of course, sweetheart." She sat on the workbench, hands clasped between her knees, and started crying. Not the quiet, dignified tears of someone who's sad, the ugly, gasping sobs of someone whose entire world has shattered. "I didn't know," she managed between breaths, "about the loan, about the forged documents, about any of it. Derek told me you'd agreed to help, that you wanted to contribute to his business because you believed in him. I thought—" She wiped her eyes. "I thought you were finally accepting him." I moved to sit beside her, close but not touching, letting her control the space. "He manipulated you, Valerie. For years. That's what he does. Finds what people want to believe and feeds it to them. But the nursing home brochures, the guardianship papers, Merlin said you were getting forgetful, that we needed to protect you. I was meeting with lawyers and investigators. That's why I was forgetful and wandering at odd hours." I pulled out the folder I'd been keeping in my desk drawer, set it on the bench between us. "You should see this. All of it. Not because I want to hurt you more, but because you need to understand what almost happened." Her hands trembled as she opened it. The first document was the forged power of attorney, my signature expertly faked, but not quite right. Then the bank records showing the $45,000 loan taken against my house. Scott's text messages about getting the old man out of the way. Merlin's emails discussing which nursing home would be least likely to let him contact Valerie. With each page, Valerie's face shifted, shock to horror to something harder. Colder. They were going to put you away, she whispered. Take everything. And I almost helped them. You didn't know. They made sure you didn't know. But I should have. She looked at me, tears streaming again, but her jaw set. You're my father. I should have protected you. Instead, I let my husband steal from you. I let his mother poison me against you. I let that happen. Valerie? No. She stood, the folder clutched in her hands. No, Dad. I need to own this. I chose Derek. I chose to believe him over you. I chose to ignore all the signs because I was too scared to admit I'd made a mistake. She took a shaky breath. What do I do now? I stood too, facing her. That's your choice, but you should make it with full information. Derek isn't going to change. This disaster won't teach him humility or honesty. He'll find someone else to blame, some other victim to exploit. The question is whether you want to be there when he does. She nodded slowly. Then she left, still carrying the folder. 3 days later, August 28th, Derek showed up at the house with flowers and desperation. I was in the workshop when I heard his voice on the terrace, loud and pleading. Valerie, please, we can fix this. I'll make it right, I swear. Just give me another chance. One more chance. Through the window, I watched her stand there, arms crossed, face expressionless. Another chance? Her voice was ice. You've had 5 years of chances, Derek. Every time I questioned something, you had an explanation. Every time something felt wrong, you convinced me I was imagining it. Every time I defended my father, you made me feel like I was choosing him over our marriage. I was under pressure. The business was failing. I panicked. I made mistakes. You forged my father's signature to steal from him. You tried to have him declared incompetent. You and your mother planned to lock him in a nursing home and take everything he worked for. She stepped closer, and even from 50 yards away, I could see Derek flinch. Those aren't mistakes. That's who you are? Valerie, I love you. No, you love what I represented. My father's money, his connections, his house. But you never loved me. If you had, you wouldn't have spent 5 years lying to my face. She went inside. Derek stood there for a moment, then tried to follow. The door locked before he reached it. That evening, I found the divorce papers on my desk with a note. Can you recommend a good lawyer? I called Edward Glenn. September arrived with cooler temperatures and a sense of things coming to an end. The legal machinery ground forward with inevitable momentum. Derek's case for the forged power of attorney went to court on September 3rd. Scott, desperate to save himself, had turned state's evidence, testifying against Derek in exchange for immunity. Watching Scott throw his best friend under the bus would have been satisfying if it hadn't been so predictable. Derek pleaded guilty. The judge gave him 2 years probation and ordered restitution of $53,400 to me for the legal fees, investigator costs, and damages. Money he'd never have. Turner Strategic Solutions filed for bankruptcy the same day. The office on Main Street closed. The fancy furniture sold at auction for pennies on the dollar. Merlin moved out of my house on September 5th. I watched from the terrace as she loaded her belongings into a rusted sedan, her face twisted with barely suppressed rage. She'd said nothing to me since the resort disaster, but her glares spoke volumes. I was the villain in her story, the cruel old man who destroyed her perfect son's bright future. I didn't bother correcting her. Some people never learn. Scott fled to Texas on September 7th. I heard through the grapevine he was working at a car dealership in Austin, telling anyone who'd listen that Derek had dragged him into the whole mess. Maybe he even believed it. Derek held on until September 10th. He'd been living in a cheap motel near the airport, burning through what little savings remained. I knew this because Valerie's lawyer had kept me updated on the divorce proceedings. That Tuesday morning, I was in the workshop giving the Mustang its final polish, when I heard an engine outside. An old Honda, rusty and dented, pulled into the driveway. Derek climbed out, looking 10 years older than he had 3 months ago. His suit was wrinkled, his hair unwashed, his eyes hollow with sleeplessness. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the house, his former home, his lost empire, his shattered dreams. Then he walked to the workshop. I kept polishing, not looking up, letting him come to me. "You destroyed my life." His voice was flat, empty of everything except exhaustion. "No," I said, buffing the spot on the hood. "I simply stopped pretending I didn't notice what you were doing. You set me up. The resort, the guests, Walters. You orchestrated everything." "I orchestrated consequences." I finally looked at him. "You forged my signature. You stole from me. You tried to have me declared incompetent and locked away. What did you think would happen?" His face twisted with something between rage and despair. "I was trying to save my business, trying to build something. You had everything. The house, the money, the connections, and you were just wasting it, playing with cars, taking pictures. I could have used those resources to... To what? Build an empire on lies and fraud." I set down the cloth. "Derek, you want to know the real difference between us? It's not age or experience or connections. It's very simple. I never confused taking advantage of people with doing business. You did. And that's why you're standing in my driveway with nothing while I'm still here with everything that matters." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I have nowhere to go." "That's not my problem. Valerie won't even talk to me. My mother won't return my calls. Scott sold me out. I have nothing. You have exactly what you earned." I picked up the cloth again. "And Derek, one more thing. Remember this. Never underestimate the old fool who spent decades in an industry where one wrong word costs millions. You played at being a businessman. I was one. You had the skills of an amateur. I had the experience of a professional. That was always going to end only one way." His face went through several expressions: denial, rage, grief, acceptance. Before settling on empty resignation, he turned and walked back to the Honda, shoulders slumped, defeated in every line of his body. I watched him drive away, felt nothing. No triumph, no pity, no satisfaction. Just the quiet certainty that justice had been served. The Mustang gleamed in the afternoon light, fully restored, better than it had been even when new. 58 years of wear erased through patience and precision. Like my life, I supposed. Both of us old, both of us valuable, both of us refusing to be discarded. On September 15th, Valerie and the kids moved back home. Not into the guest rooms, into their rooms. Their permanent rooms. She stood in the kitchen that morning, coffee cup in hand, looking out at the bay. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for showing me the truth, for protecting me even when I didn't deserve it. You're my daughter. That's not conditional." She nodded, then smiled. A real smile, the first I'd seen in months. "The Mustang looks incredible. Want to go for a drive?" We loaded the kids into the back seat and drove down to the pier, the one Derek had so dismissively mentioned that night in June. The perfectly good pier that was good enough for an old fool. I parked and got out, camera in hand. The sunset was spectacular, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. I took photo after photo, framing the shots carefully, capturing the moment. Valerie stood beside me, watching. "Are you happy, Dad?" I lowered the camera and looked at her, at my grandchildren playing on the pier, at the Mustang, restored and perfect, at the bay stretching endlessly before us. "I'm free," I said, "and that's better." She linked her arm through mine, and we stood there watching the sun sink into the water. Behind us, the Mustang waited, patient and beautiful. Ahead of us, the ocean stretched infinite and full of possibility. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to be erased, about standing up when someone tried to push you down, about showing the world that respect is earned, not stolen. Derek had called me an old fool. He'd tried to take everything from me. Instead, he'd given me back my life. The sun touched the horizon, and I raised my camera one last time. Click! Perfect! If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.